The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, my name is Jillian Schaefer and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Payroll Year-End and 1099 Processing Procedures in Sage 100 Workshop, presented by Monica Byrne of SWK Technologies. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise down. However, you can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar. To submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar. We will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording this presentation and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees as well as to those who registered but were not able to attend. Please take a moment at the end of the presentation to answer our one survey question. With that said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend our webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business by providing you software and industry knowledge, tools, and support whenever you need it. So whether you're here doing research for a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions throughout the webinar. Lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. So we encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Monica.
Hi, everybody. This is Monica Byrne. I'm a senior consultant here at SWK Technologies. I've been working with the Sage 100 product for around 15 years now, and I'm here today to talk to you about payroll, year-end processing, and accounts payable 1099 processing. So when we talk about year-end processing for both accounts payable and payroll, we're specifically talking about typically 1099s and W-2 forms and other government forms that we need to process at the end of the year. We have guidelines and things like that from the government as to how and when we need to process them. And we have some software that allows you to do that within Sage 100. So we're going to talk about those today. I'm not going to get much into like period end and year end processing in payroll or accounts payable because we have another webinar coming up for that that includes year end processing and closing procedures. So I'm just going to focus on the government forms, the 1099s and W-2s and related information on that. So we're going to start with payroll today and then move on to accounts payable. But first and most importantly, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the payroll and 1099 forms. So the W-2 and 1099 forms. Sage 100 offers forms and the website is sagechecks.com. So if you go to sagechecks.com, you can find all the forms that you're going to need to process your 1099s and W-2s right here. I did notice they have Cyber Week savings going on. So you see you can save 20% on everything with the code SAGE20. So it might not hurt to order those forms this week so that you can save the 20%. But when you go to sagechecks.com, you can go to tax and business forms in the middle, and you'll see there's an option for 1099s and an option for W-2s and W-3s. So I'm going to click on the W-2s and W-3s, but the 1099s are pretty much the same. When you go in here, it's going to show you a whole bunch of forms and you'll be like, what do I need? You actually will narrow your search on the left-hand side by selecting Sage 100. You'll actually select Sage 100 Cloud if you're using Atrix. You'll notice it says newer eFile service. That's the one you want. Non-tax service users would be for Sage 100 that's older and was not using Atrix at the time. So we are using Atrix. That's the third-party provider that provides Sage with the tools to print the 1099s and W-2s. So you're going to use this Sage 100 Cloud one. When you click on that, you'll notice that it narrows down your forms quite a bit. So the forms in Sage 100 that we're going to be printing, our 1099s as well as our W-2s and that information, are going to be printed on 4-up pages and they'll be blank. So Atrix actually prints the form on the blank sheet of paper, which is really nice. So that's how you can find your forms on the checks and forms, sagechecks.com. Additionally, I have another web page I just wanted to show you here that you might want to take down, atrix.com/support. So if you have any trouble with the Atrix software itself, you can go to the support page and they have a way that you can search their knowledge base and find their FAQs. So that's another important, as far as year-end processing is concerned, it's another important website, atrix.com/support and sagechecks.com. So let's move into Sage 100. I'm working in Sage 100 version 2020 today, so it's the latest released version of Sage 100. It might look slightly different than your version of Sage 100, but the Atrix functionality should process the same way or work the same way. So I'm going to go into payroll, and we're going to move on to payroll period end. So the federal and state tax reporting, this is where you'll print your W-2s and all your tax reporting, is located in the period end menu in the payroll module. So when you go down here to payroll period end and click on the federal and state tax reporting, this is where we can start the Atrix wizard in order to print our W-2 forms and other tax reporting that we need regarding payroll. Couple things to keep in mind. If you're not on the latest and greatest payroll version 2.20 something, you still will have the period end processing for the federal and state tax reporting. It just might be called something slightly different. So when I go into federal, state, and state tax reporting, I can choose whether I want to do my federal or my state reports, or existing reports would be reports that I've saved previously when I went through this process. So federal and state are our options, and we're going to start with our federal. And when you notice when you choose federal, then the next thing you need to choose is the form name. So here's a list of forms that are available to you through the Atrix software for tax reporting. And these are the federal forms and not the state forms. So you'll see down here we have our W-2s, which we're going to walk through in a minute. We have a W-4. If you need to print W-4s from employees, you can use this here. And there's all kinds of specific forms that you would likely know if you needed them, related to Puerto Rico or some other different reporting if your business needs to report in that way. So I'm going to go ahead and close this tax form window again, and I'm going to go back here to the state to show you. So if you have state reporting, you can choose state, and then you would choose the state that you need to report for. So every state typically has some different reporting. So for instance, if I choose New York, I live in New York, there's a few different reports in here that you can print. Of course, your quarterly reports are in here, so you would use Atrix. You could file your quarterly reports this way as well. One thing to keep in mind with Atrix or with our federal and state tax reporting is that this is where you print the W-2s in your reporting, as well as if you want to e-file them. So you go through the same wizard, whether you just want to print them or if you want to e-file them using Atrix. If you choose to e-file, Atrix is going to take over that process. That's all they do, particularly is tax processing. So they're going to take over that process as you go through the wizard, and they will e-file the information for you. So it's not Sage actually doing the e-filing, it's Atrix. So I'm going to go back to the federal, and we're going to run some W-2s. Now, the W-2s is the most common form, of course, that is used, but this wizard is going to operate pretty much the same for any form that you choose. There may be a few different questions available depending on the form that you choose to run, but we're going to use the W-2s right now. One thing to keep in mind is the 2020 forms are not available from Atrix yet, so the government is still finalizing changes, and usually mid-December or so, those changes are finalized and the forms are released, and that's when Atrix goes ahead and updates their forms. So that's why we're going to be looking at a form 2019 this time. Obviously in January when you go to do your W-2s, you'll be using the 2020 form. Once you fill out that top section, you'll see that the reporting period comes over from Sage 100. There's W-2 selections as to the kind of employer. So if any of these apply, if you're tax exempt, if you're state and local government, etc., you could choose one of those. In our particular case, none of those apply. You can review the information that's in the company area. This information comes from Sage 100. So where your address shows up, this is all sourcing from Sage 100, and you'll see your federal ID number as well as your telephone number. If you're looking for that information, if that information doesn't look right, you can go ahead and change that or modify that in company maintenance. So you would go to Library Master, Main, and then Company Maintenance, choose your company code, and you'll see here is my address that showed up. And if I go to the additional tab, you'll see that there's my federal ID, there's my state ID, there's contact information for this reporting. So all of that will show up on the additional tab. Prior versions of Sage 100 don't have the contact information in here like this one does. and it doesn't have the tax reporting here either, the tax ID number is on the main tab. So if you don't see an additional tab, just look on the main tab and you'll see your tax ID information is there. So going back to our federal and state tax reporting, that's where all this information sources from. So one thing to always keep in mind when you're running these forms through Atrix or running any reports through Atrix is that the information that you see on the screens you can change. So if I said, oh, this is incorrect, my tax federal ID number actually ends in a 9, I could go ahead and change that there, but this does not change the information in Sage 100. So that's important to realize. I would have to go back to company maintenance at a later time and change that information in Sage 100. That also is the case if we change any information on our employees or in the 1099 case on our vendors. If we change them within this wizard, it does not change the information back in Sage 100. So just keep all of that in mind, because typically when running any of these kinds of reports and forms, we want that information to match. So once I go ahead and verify all my information, I'm going to say proceed. Before I do that, I'd like to step back and tell you one more thing. If you click on federal and state tax reporting and it doesn't launch, if it says it's not installed, this is a separate install from Sage 100, so it does have to be installed on your workstation in order to get it to launch. If you do need to get it to launch, it is located in your Math 90 directory. So where your Sage 100 is stored on the server, so in my case it's in C Sage, and I'm in version 2020. So in your Math 90 directory on your server, there's a folder called WK Setup. That WK Setup is where you would install your Sage 100 client or the workstation software for Sage 100, but it's also where you can install the federal and state tax reporting. So in order to do that, I would just launch autorun.exe, and you'll see one of the items on there is install federal and state tax reporting. So that would allow you to install that piece of software that you need to run what we would call Atrix or federal and state tax reporting. And of course, if you have trouble installing it or any issues like that, you can contact us or your consultant that you work with, and we can get you hooked up so that it installs appropriately. So I'm going to say proceed here, and now it's going to process the employees. So this is going to be a walkthrough wizard, and Atrix is going to ask us to verify some information as we go through it, and it's also going to let us know if there's any information that's incorrect. So this is typical. It's going to go through pulling, basically it's pulling the information from Sage 100 that it needs to bring in for W-2s or any of our tax reporting. So it's going to ask me if I want to use my work in progress. So I saved what I was doing before when I was playing with this, so that's why it's asking that. So if you go in through the W-2 process and you start going through it, and then you decide that you can't do your W-2s right now and you X out of it or close out of it, it is actually going to prompt you to save that information as long as you're not running a test drive. And we'll talk about a test drive after as well. So I'm going to say no, I'm going to do it from scratch, just so I can show you what happens. So this is the W-2 setup wizard, and this is where it's going to ask you if you want to test drive it or not. So you can test drive the W-2s and W-3s with the first 25 employees, or you can test drive all of your employees, or you can say, start processing my W-2s. If you choose either of the test drive options and you decide to back out at any time, it's not going to prompt you to save the information. So if you changed any of your information within this wizard, not in Sage 100, as it doesn't go back and change that, if you changed any information in this wizard, it will not retain it if you're using a test drive and you back out. This is basically just a test run. I'm not really going to print them at this time. Additionally, you won't be offered to eFile through the test runs either. So if you're looking to eFile, that won't be offered through the test drive. So I'm going to say no thanks, just so I can show you the full-blown process. No thanks, start processing my W-2s and W-3s. One other thing to keep in mind, my clients a lot of times will be like, oh, should I always test drive it first? No, you don't really have to. Even if you say no thanks, start processing my W-2s, you can actually process them and save it, like I said, not file it at the time. Or if you're just printing the forms and you're not e-filing, you can always do this processing W-2s. It's no different really than a test drive. So I'm going to say next. It'll bring in my company federal ID number, and that's coming in from Sage 100 in that previous screen that we looked at. You'll remember that I changed the 8 to a 9 on the end, so it's reflecting that change, but that change is not reflected in Sage 100. I'm going to have to change that after. Do you use multiple payroll data files for the same federal EIN? So what this means in the Sage 100 realm is that I have multiple companies that I process, companies in Sage 100. So I'm an ABC company, but maybe my ABX company or my XYZ company, I have payroll in all three of those, and it's one federal identification number. If it's one federal identification number, then you would be using multiple payroll data files for the same EIN. I actually only have one, but I'm going to say yes for now just so that I can show you what happens. When I say next, it's going to come up and give me some options related to the multiple payroll files. So save the process payroll data file for use in combined filing. So that means it would save the file, and then we would electronically file all of them together, however many there end up being. We can export the process payroll data file as a password protected file for filing by another person. So this would be if you were not having Atrix file it. We can import a payroll data file processed by another person. So if another person processed one and they had that exported file, we could import that here and it would show up in the list below to combine with the one we're doing now, or we can merge them. We can merge all the selected ones that we saved or imported into one file. So it gives you the option to merge them all into one file ultimately, depending on who processes the information and how you save that information. So I'm going to go back to the single. That's really our most common setup with most of our clients is a single company per EIN. So it's now going to walk us through a wizard with the rest of the information it needs. So I'm just going to want to carefully look over this information, and I'm going to say next. Now you'll notice that this information did not come through from my contact information and company maintenance. That's fairly new, like I said, in Sage 100, and they plan to be connecting this at a later time so that it comes in from there. You can put, of course, the contact information in here again if you would like. I'm going to say next. Which type of filer are you? I'm filing for my company and employer. That's typically our most common one. But if you're a third-party paid tax preparer and you're filing for one or multiple companies, you can check this box. And when you check, it's going to allow you to fill out the third-party preparer information that's required when a third-party prepares your tax document. So I'm going to do it as if I'm filing for my company or employer. I'm going to say next. So this is interesting. I've noticed this it doesn't bring over my full state tax account number, and I think probably because I have a not real state tax account number in there. So what will happen when you get to this is under state and local tax items, you'll have a list of the states and the tax items that are relevant related to the states that you process in, and it's going to show your tax account number. These are in red, and I left them in red so that I could show you because there's something wrong with the tax account number. So when I click on it, you'll see what's wrong with it is I'm missing a couple digits. So I was missing a couple digits of my tax account number. So I would have to go through and resolve that if they're in red prior to moving on. And you're going to see that throughout the whole Atrix product, that information that's required to be fixed is going to be in red. So this one's missing quite a few things. And then our state unemployment here looks fine. So you'll see now they're not in red, so they're all accurate. Hopefully they would be accurate. Obviously those are not regular numbers, but your numbers would be accurate. And I'm going to say next. And there's some data verification information. So do you have any employees who are exempt from any part of Medicare, or Social Security taxes? So it'll process those appropriately if you say yes. Do you have any employees who are members of the clergy? Same thing. Do you want to use control numbers on your W-2s? So if you'd like to add a control number, you can for internal processes. You can say yes here, and then it'll prompt you for the control number information. And then do you have any employees who elected to only receive W-2 forms electronically? So if you did have that, you could say yes here, and you could send them electronically, of course, using the Atrix software. So then W-3 information, if you need a control box number, or something that's required in box A, you can put that in here. You do have, that's optional. You do have to check what kind of payer you are. So are you, most typical we see is 941, but if you're any of these other filers, you can check those as well. And then also the kind of employer. This is coming over from our selections we made in the beginning of the wizard, but I could change that here if I needed to. And if I had any third-party sick pay, an establishment number, or another EIN that was used this year that you need to report, you could put all of that information in here. As well as if the business terminated, you can record that so it fills out the information on the W-3 appropriately. So it's going to come up, this is going to bring up your W-2 information, and it's going to be in a grid-like format for you to review the information. It's really kind of a nice way to work in the information, and you'll see as I go through it. It's going to walk you through checking each piece of the information. So it kind of does a thorough job of making sure your data is accurate. So of course we would recommend looking through this information pretty carefully so that you can see everything. So here's what it looks like. And you'll see up at the top is your key. It says verify employee information. So that's what it wants you to do in this first step, is verify that. So you'll see I have all my employees listed here and all their addresses and so forth. So I can look through this and say, oh yeah, everything looks okay. This looks pretty good actually. So I kind of look through that. And then I can say next for my next step. As long as everything's okay with your employee information, it's going to go through to the next step. Otherwise, it's going to say you have some information that's incorrect, which is what it's doing right now, giving me some errors. So you'll notice the fields are highlighted in red that have errors, and it gives me an explanation. So the employee first name cannot be blank. So you'll see, and this one was interesting when I looked at it, and that's why I left it here for you guys to see as well. Sure, the employee first name cannot be blank, and I don't have an employee first name that's blank. But if you look down at rows number 36 and 37, I actually have a couple employees, Mary and Jerry, who technically have invalid characters in their first name. So the first name, it's expecting one constant name, and what it's actually seeing is a first name and a middle initial. So that's not acceptable. You could certainly change. You can change that here, which is what we're going to do. But keep in mind, like I said before, that does not change it in the accounting software. So you're going to have to go back to Sage 100 afterwards and change it in the employee file so that this doesn't happen again next year. So basically, you would just take the E and move it to the middle name box that's available in your employee maintenance. So, and the other items that were, one is an address missing. You'll see in line 1, so it does need an address. And then on the left-hand side are social security numbers, and it's reviewed the social security numbers and determined they are incorrect because a social security number cannot begin with a 9 or a 666. Interesting. I'm not sure why. You can print this list here if you would like. Otherwise, you can say go back and correct. So I'm going to go back and correct this. So of course, I can correct this right in my wizard, and that will be just fine. However, I need to remember to correct this in Sage 100 after as well. The other option would be to close out of this, not save your changes, go back and fix the information in Sage 100 and rerun your wizard to create your W-2s. So I fixed the first one. Here I'm going to fix these. I'm going to pretend I know what these social security numbers should be. So I'm just going to change them all to begin with a 1. But of course, you would have to verify that information and see what actually was wrong. So basically, I'm just double clicking on the space, and that's allowing me to edit it, just kind of like other programs or softwares work. So I'm just going to go ahead and edit all of those. And then I'm also going to go down here, and I'm going to change, remove my middle initial. Now, I may want to put these middle initials in the middle name box. So I can do that if I want to add information. So middle initial A, Jerry had a middle initial of E, and I can put that information in there if I would like. So there's a scroll bar down at the bottom. There's actually 2 scroll bars. The left-hand side is what I would consider constant information or employee maintenance information. And then the right-hand side is all your payroll information, dollars, and things like that. So you can scroll these independently to look at the information. So you'll see how I can scroll across and look at all of the information and what boxes it's falling into. Same with the static data, I can scroll across here as well. So all of that information, of course, is pulling from Sage 100. And once I correct everything that it told me to look at, so it's not telling me yet to look at the information on the right-hand side, so keep that in mind. It's telling me to look at this information on the left-hand side, and that's why it's highlighted in blue. So I'm going to click Next here. And when I click Next, it should come up with what it wants me to look at next. So verify additional employee information. So you'll see it's looking at box 13 now. So statutory employee, retirement plan, or third-party sick pay. So I kind of want to eyeball that, see if I have all my information in there that I need. I have all my people who have retirement plans checked, those kinds of things. Obviously, this information is coming from Sage. So if you have a confidence level that that information in Sage is good, you can kind of eyeball it. You can double check it. You can check it as detailed as you would like, of course. I'm going to say next, and you'll see it'll move on to the next section that it wants me to look at. So now we're on the right-hand side. So it says verify the federal information. So do my wages look correct? You'll notice at the top of each of these boxes, there's some totals. So you may have run some reports in Sage 100, and you might have some totals on hand. You might want to verify those totals, make sure that everything's coming over well. I don't see or have not seen a lot of problems with your information not coming over accurately. So I think it's pretty reliable, but it doesn't hurt to double check, of course. And then I'm going to say next. So what it found here was something that is programmed into Atrix to check tax rules and things like that. So now you'll see here, this is a warning, and I left this here so I could show you guys. Potential issues have been discovered and highlighted in yellow. If the employees are exempt from these issues as indicated in Circular E, Section 15, select Continue without correcting. So if you know something that, if you've reviewed this Circular E, Section 15, and this information does fall into that, you know that you can disregard it and you can move on. Otherwise, you can complete or correct the yellow fields and use the tab for the next yellow field. So one thing I didn't mention was you can tab through your errors as well, and it'll go to the next one. And then it'll give you more information down here. You can print your list, you can continue without correcting, or you can go back and correct. So I'm actually going to continue without correcting because that's a lot of, you'll see I have a lot in yellow, so I'm not going to take the time to correct them with you. I'm just going to assume that they fall into Circular E Section 15. And I'm going to hit continue without correcting. Now, it likes to make sure that you know what you're talking about in that sense. So you'll see as we go on a little further, it's going to prompt me again for that. It's going to say, ask me to look at it again and make sure that that's what I want to do. So now up at the top left, it's telling me to verify my state information. So you'll notice here's all my state information. So I operate in California and Wisconsin. So it's asking me to look at all of that information and make sure that looks relevant. Once I verified that, I'll say next. And it'll move on and say verify all other data. So basically it's saying look everything over, make sure it looks okay, because this is, from here we're actually going to go ahead and print these W-2s and all the tax forms and such that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and click next again. There is a company setup button up here that takes you back to that company information screen in the wizard if you needed to review any of that information again or you realized anything was incorrect, just so you know. And then you'll see that here's the warning again on those yellow boxes. Are you sure you want to continue without correcting? So I'm just going to say continue without correcting. So now it's going to come up and give us some options. So basically it's telling you for a complete W-2 eFile service, the cost this year is $2.29 per employee. On the right-hand side is all the things that they'll do for you. Print employee copies, track the delivery. They'll offer online employee copies and copies for your records. So they'll file everything. So basically that's the whole shebang. It's everything that you need. Additionally, you can get a discount if you do your W-2s first, then your 1095s if you have to do ACA reporting as well. So you can get a discount on that. And then we'll say next here. And it'll give us, this is the kind of bread and butter of everything. This is going to tell you what it would cost you if you were to do these options. And this is where you get to choose if you just want to print your form. So if you want to e-file or you want some combination of e-filing, this is where you can kind of set it up and see what it's going to cost. So the complete W-2 e-filing service, as we talked about, is $2.39 for $102.77. EW2 only employee copies. So this is, it's funny because this will open the help, and I just wanted to show you that there are some hyperlinks to the help. So this is if your employee did not get a mail copy, they get only the e-files. We said we did not have any employees that requested that, so that's why that's at 0, and that was in the beginning of the wizard. And then file your federal W-2s and W-3s to the FSA, file your state W-2s and reconciliation forms, and then EW2s are available for all employees. So you'll see over here the cost breakdown. This is the $239 per employee it told us about, comes to $102.77 for our 43 employees. Not really too bad considering the time it might take you to print and mail and all of that and file the rest of everything. So if you tell me, hey, I don't want to e-file anything, you know, I'm a small company, I'm going to do my own thing. Oh, and you'll also notice they do have next business day mailing. So then if you don't want the complete W-2 service, you do have other options. So when you click on the other options, this is where you want to be if you just want to print everything. So if you just want to print everything, you can actually uncheck anything e-file, click all the prints. So I print my employee W-2s, print my federal W-2s and W-3s, and print my state W-2s and reconciliation forms. Of course, they're official copies. My total cost would be 0. So Sage always offers you the option through Atrix to print your information for free. Filing, obviously, is another option. So under our other options, we also have some other things as well. So the full service was $239. But if we want to e-file our federal information or e-file our state W-2s and reconciliation forms, that it would cost us $49.45. This does not include the print and mailing them to our employees. So we would still have to print and mail them to our employees, but everything else would be e-filed. So you get to choose all of the different options that you want. Now, if you choose the complete W-2 e-filing service and we say next, it'll ask us if we want to buy a PDF archive of our W-2s, and that costs $34.95 plus $4.95 shipping this year. I'm going to say no to the PDF archive. It'll ask us the states that we want to file, which form we use in Wisconsin. So do we use this report? And if not, we can say none. So whichever it is, and it'll give you all the information for all the states. And then it'll say, based on your selections, we need you to review the data of the following items. So we're actually going to go through the process of reviewing that data as we walk through the wizard. Now, the only difference between printing them and e-filing them is at the end of our process, we're going to be required to essentially log into Atrix or create an account with Atrix. So similar to you creating accounts for other web pages, we're going to have to log in or create an account. And then we're going to have to obviously provide payment information for that service. That login information is going to be important, of course, because that's going to be your account with Atrix. That's going to be where you can go in and set up your employees to be able to find their information. You'll be able to go in there and see your information, your filing information, all of that. So you'll want to keep that information handy once you set that up and use that year after year so that all your history stays there with Atrix. If I had chosen to just print everything, it would still come to this screen here. This would be the next step. So they're both the same literally until the end when you have to pay for the e-filing. So right here, this is our final W-2s. So you'll see here, this is our copy, of course, because right now I have 4 W-2s on one page for different employees, but this is our copy. And you'll see up at the top, it says employer W-2. We can print it here. So if we wanted to just print it, we'd print it. Otherwise, we click next step, and it'll say, please insert the 4-part. It's basically trying to force you to print these anyway. So insert the 4-part blank perforated W-2 paper you purchased now. So we're going to say okay, and then it'll offer to print those for us. I'm not going to print it. Obviously, that wouldn't be beneficial on a webinar, but I'm just going to cancel it. Otherwise, you'd hit print and it would print them. One thing to note, I told you earlier in the webinar that you want to buy blank forms from sagechecks.com. And that's because you'll notice all the lines are printing here. So it actually prints all the form information. Atrix prints all the form information in lines. If you've been using Sage 100 for a long time and you've done these W-2s previously before Atrix, you probably realize that you used to have to print your W-2s on pre-printed forms, and there was always alignment issues. We used to have to go through a lot of craziness to get everything to align appropriately. So this is really nice, as you know that all your boxes are going to line up with your paper because it's all going to print on that blank form. So now you'll see here come your W-2s for your federal W-2 report that you have to send into the government. So this is also yours. You'll see that we have more than one employee on here. That's fine. We're going to print next steps. I'm going to say no to print it right now. And then it's going to go on to my federal W-3. And here's my W-3 transmittal information. I can print that, of course. And I'm going to say no to print that now. And here's my Wisconsin reporting. Now, I should say the only difference in this wizard compared to not e-filing and e-filing is the fact that I'm not printing each individual W-2. So it's not bringing that up to prompt me to print it. It's actually having me print just the company information. So here's my Wisconsin W-2 for my company. Not going to print that either. And here comes my Wisconsin W-2/7 report that I chose. I said that we filed this report. So it's working on that information. And it'll also say, so you will see this in some of the state information, that Sage 100 or Atrix doesn't have all the information needed for the form. If so, it's going to come up with the information in red. And you're going to have to put in that information in red. So I'm just going to put enter the number of miscellaneous 1099. So that would be from your 1099 file if you file. So I'm going to just say 10 of them. Enter the number of this. I'm going to say 0. Quarter ending information. So this doesn't have the quarter ending information actually because I'm in demo data, but it should fill in this quarter ending information for you. So I'm just going to put it in there. And then if you reported any deposits, if you paid any deposits against your tax information for Wisconsin, that's what this would be for. So you'll notice if I put $1,000 in here, it lowers my tax amount due by $1,000. So once you have anything in red filled in, then you can hit next step on this one. I missed some red. So down at the bottom, who's my contact person? And my contact person phone number. So now everything's filled in, and I can go ahead and click next step. This is your final opportunity to review or edit this report. So you want to make sure, double check it, all of that, and then we can say agree here. When we say agree, it's going to prompt us if we want to print it. I'm not going to print it at this time. And then it's going to connect to the Atrix File Center, and this is where you're either going to create an account or you're going to log in. So it notices that my EIN number is not enrolled, and this will happen to you the first time. So you can go ahead and say, I have enrolled and have my login ID if you do, or you can enroll in it here. If I click enroll here, it's going to take you to the Atrix web page, and it's going to prompt you to enroll. So you'll notice here, if I go to enrollment, I can click here to enroll, and it'll take me to an information page. And this is where I put in all of my information, including my EIN and company information. And then I save my changes, and it'll prompt me to register, prompt me for any information that's further required by Atrix. You can store payment information in there so that you can pay for your e-filing, of course. So you'll need a credit card or bank account in order to pay for that information, to pay for your filings. So I'm going to cancel this session because we aren't going, we don't have an Atrix file for this EIN number. And I'll say I'm going to try again later. So that's fine. Now, one more item I'll show you is if we run the federal and state tax reporting and we're going to not e-file anything, we do get the option to print our W-2s. So I'll show you that real quick, one more quick run through. This one I'm going to do quicker. I'm not going to go through every option as we've gone through them before. I'm just going to have it create their work files, and I'll show you how we would print our regular W-2s rather than e-file them. So if you're not e-filing them within that wizard, it's going to come up and offer you to print those W-2s. I'm going to say no to that because I don't want to e-file this time. I'm just going to print everything. And you'll notice I've been saying no thanks and just printing my W-2s every time. So that's not it sounds final, but it's not really final. You can actually rerun this and rerun this and rerun this. I am filing for my company. Really business. I guess I might have wanted to go from so I didn't have to do this information again. So remember, I would go and change this in Sage 100 so that it reflects appropriately in there, so I wouldn't have to change it each time. And 941. Getting all our information together. So the keys to this really are decide whether you want to e-file or not, so that you know that what you're going to do related to that. You can actually pre-register on Atrix webpage, so you could go ahead and set up everything in advance if you wanted to. That would work just fine. So you're going to want to know that if you're going to e-file or not going to e-file. Check your information in company maintenance so that you don't have to make changes like this within the software. So you'll want to check that information. Make sure your e-filing is installed. And if your e-filing is not installed on your workstation, you can go to that Mass 90 directory and then the WK setup directory on your server to resolve that, to install that. So all of that information is what you'll want to check before running any of these W-2s. So you'll see I can go through here actually pretty quick if there's no issues and I've already verified all my information. So sometimes you may do that if you have already been in here doing this and you know all the information is okay, you just need to reprint them. You can actually run through this pretty quick and get to the forms information. So this time I'm only going to print. So I don't want to e-file anything. And so you'll see there's no cost to that. When you say that, of course, they do try to sell you the filing. I'm going to say no. So I'm not going to do Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I would have to file electronically. So I'm going to just say next here. And then you'll come up and it'll process all your employees, just like it did in the wizard before. Only this time it's going to show you, it's going to give you your actual employee W-2s. And that's the first one here. So you'll see up at the top, it says employee W-2. And as soon as it loads everything, you'll see it. All 43 of my employees. And so you'll see here, this is Harvey's. You'll see Harvey's on every section. This is Harvey's, and I can actually scroll through, which I didn't show you before, and look at all the pages if I needed to look at all the pages. And then I can print it from here. So that's the only difference if you choose the e-filing versus anything else. Versus e-filing versus printing. The printing is going to show you your W-2s. The e-filing will not give you the W-2s to print because it's going to be printing them and filing them for you. Okay. That's the payroll side, and I think we'll open up to questions after we go through accounts payable. So accounts payable, there's a couple things to talk about in accounts payable. Sage released an update recently, so we're in version 2020, so product update 1. included changes to the to the 1099s for non-employee compensation, so 1099 NEC. So if I choose a vendor here and I go to my additional tab where my 1099 information is stored, you'll see that I have a vendor type here of business. But if I choose the form, I have an additional form now, the non-employee compensation form. So that's what's going to tell Sage and ultimately tell Atrix that this information needs to go into a non-employee compensation area. Sage does provide a utility. Please contact us or contact your consultant that you work with if you need that utility that will change these 1099s appropriately from miscellaneous to non-employee compensation so that you don't have to go in and change every single 1099 vendor to your non-employee compensation. There is a utility that Sage has provided for that. So let us know if you need that. So that's where you would start that new non-employee compensation. And you'll notice if I choose that and I go to 1099 history, my non-employee compensation form looks a little different. So this is where my non-employee compensation would be. And it will, I just entered it in there because this is a new entry, but it will forward from your transactions in Sage 100 to the non-employee compensation area. And this is my miscellaneous as it was before. So I'm going to go back here and keep this as miscellaneous, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So that's the key piece of information, is to go through your vendors and check your 1099. Go into the 1099 history for the year you're in. Make sure that that information looks correct, because that information is what's going to be pulled over into Atrix to process our 1099s. Our 1099s in accounts payable are located in the reports menu. You'll see there's an option called Form 1099 Tax Reporting. So when I click on that, it's going to come up and ask us, some information about what we want to print. So I'm going to do my miscellaneous. Now you'll notice here that I don't have a non-employee compensation form here. The reason I don't have a non-employee compensation form here is because now I'm connected with Atrix. Atrix has not released that yet. So that's one of the things. So the government releases it, Atrix updates their information. So probably by December 15th or so, Atrix will release that non-employee compensation form, and you'll have an option here to choose and print the non-employee compensation. So for today, I'm going to show you the miscellaneous one. The non-employee compensation will run the same way. It'll be an option under form type here, and you'll be able to print that form appropriately. You'll just want to make sure that all of your 1099 information is sorted into the appropriate categories when you review that information. So I'm going to go into the miscellaneous. I choose my year that I'm working on. I can choose all my vendors. I can do individuals or businesses separately if I choose to print them separately, or I like to print them separately. And then I can put in my minimum year-to-date information right in here so that I can know when to print those forms. I'm going to click Accept at the bottom. Now the 1099 or the tax reporting, the e-filing and tax reporting that I told you that is a additional install, includes the 1099 and W-2. So there's not two separate installs for those if you do have to install it on your workstation. There's just one install. So kind of like the W-2, it's going to come through with this company setup wizard. Do you want to test drive or do you want to process them? Either way, brings over your TIN number. Please read carefully. Do you use multiple 1099 data files for the same EIN? So this is just like that question in the payroll. Do I have multiple companies in Sage 100, and do I need to combine that information? So if I choose yes, then you're going to get that same screen that we looked at before, where we can combine files once we create them all. I'm going to go back to single. That's our most common. So most commonly we do see single in our client database. But if you do multiples and you need some assistance on it, please reach out and we can give you some more detailed information on how to do that. I'm going to say next. Which type of filer are you? I'm filing for my company employer. If you're filing as a third-party tax preparer, you will have to go ahead and put that information in on the following screen. If I have any state and local tax items for 1099, I don't in this company. They would show up here with the tax account number, just like we saw on the payroll side. Do you have any recipients who elected to receive 1099 forms electronically? I'm going to say no. So that would require us to essentially e-file those so that they are received electronically by the recipient. Recipient identification numbers. So as far as social security numbers or any of the EINs that are stored in there, how do you want them to show? I'm going to truncate them. You can truncate with an asterisk, you can truncate with an X, no truncation, whichever you prefer. Would you like to print RINs? So that's recipient identification numbers on the recipient copies. So you can choose that option if you want to. And when we click next, it's going to do the same kind of thing. So you'll notice this is very similar to the payroll wizard. Same sort of process. Grabbing all the information and merging it with the Apex software. I don't have a lot of 1099s in this test company, but I do have 4. So you'll see them listed here. Same thing. It's going to want us to check all the information, so I'm going to review that all. One thing I noticed is when I was testing this before and I wanted to show you is this is the full name for Roger, but it doesn't split it out into last name and first name. So that's up to you whether you want to. I think the full name, and you'll see it as we go through it, is just fine. It shows up as the full name so it'll show up Roger W. Lerner. So you'll see that as we go through. If you put the last name, first name in, separate out the middle name, I think it'll probably format last name, first name instead. So you can look through all this taxpayer identification numbers. Oh, it actually wanted me to check the taxpayer identification numbers is what it's looking at for this information in blue here. So I'd look and make sure that that looks okay. It's coming from stage 100. It should be correct. Doesn't hurt to check. Check if the FEIN is checked. So if it's a company, if they're using a federal ID number instead, and is it in a federal ID number format? Yep, looks good. Next here. Verify the recipient's names and addresses. So this is, I'm going faster, I realize, for this one, but this is the same as on the W-2 side. So we can keep scrolling through. So I verified all my amounts, verified my filing state, and keep walking through the wizard. Verify amount of state income tax withheld. So if there was a state income tax withheld, you can verify that information. I'm going to scroll through, obviously, and keep looking at everything. Okay, next. And it's going to come up same process. They check, do we want to do the 1099 e-file services? $29 per recipient. Same process here. I'm actually just going to print them right now. I'm not going to go through the e-file stuff this time. So we're just going to say we're going to print them. And of course, like we talked about earlier, that's free if you want to print them. Yes, we're going to do California. We'll say next. And it's going to bring up my forms, just like in the W-2 forms. Same with the W-2s. These are printing on blank paper. It's going to print all the lines and boxes appropriately and the data within them. Brings up nicely and appropriately. And you'll see here's our federal 1099 miscellaneous income forms. And they ask us if I want to print it. I'm not going to print it right now, of course. Here's our federal 1096 that's going to be coming up so that we can file that with the government. Here's our 1096. We can print that, of course, if we want to. I'm not going to print it right now. And here comes our California 1099. Like I said, with the non-employee compensation that's required for 2020, once Matrix has that available, you'll be able to do, instead of 1099 list, it'll be the 1099 NBC form. And what's the next step? I'm not going to print them right now. And here's our 1096 for the state. I'm not going to print that one either at this point. And here's our recipient 1099. So here's where we would print them for the recipients. Not going to print them right now. Instructions. So if you want to print the instructions for the 1099 miscellaneous on the back, it actually prints those instructions as well for the recipient. And here's our last form. You'll see it'll show us report 7 of 7. This is our payer form. So these are our 1099 miscellaneous. You'll see that they're multiple on a page because they're for our records. And I'm going to say no, and it'll come up with our history file options as to whether we want to save this or not. And you'll see our last completed action. It'll show us all of that. And we can say next or close that, whichever you'd like to do. One thing I didn't mention, and what I'll mention in closing, is that once you print these W-2s or 1099s, if during the year next year you have to revise something, something's not correct, or a vendor calls and says the information's not correct and you find it's not, Atrix does allow you to revise that after the fact as well. So you'll be able to revise that, reprint the documentation, and send out a revised to your vendors or employees if necessary. So that concludes what I have for you guys today. So I guess I can turn it over to Jolene if we have any questions.
Thanks, Monica. We'll now open it up for questions. If you have any questions, please enter them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar, and we'll give that a minute in case any more come through. And just a reminder, everyone, we do have a subject matter expert here. This is a great opportunity to have your questions answered in real time. And we do have a few that came through during the presentation, Monica. The first being, is there any way to export that payroll worksheet in order to manipulate the data in Excel?
At this time, there is not. I'm hoping, a lot of clients have asked for that, and I'm hoping that will come in the future.
We have another. I was called away for a while. My question, which may have already been answered, is can we just run vendor 1099 forms only from Sage? We have an outside payroll company, so we do not use that module, but we do issue 1099 forms to appropriate vendors. I did not see a 1099 miscellaneous form in the drop-down menu at the start of the webinar, but as I said, I was called away. We are about to upgrade to Sage 2020.
Yes, absolutely. So you'll run that through accounts payable, your Form 1099 tax reporting. And when you get to so you'll still use the Atrix program, but you're allowed to print them for free. So you'll just get to the point and you'll just choose to print everything. It'll come up with a 0 total, and then it'll forward you to your forms to print.
We have another. Does the employer contribution to HSA or dependent care cafeteria plan still have to be manually entered into the worksheet, or has this issue been resolved in the 2020 update?
In the 2020 update, I believe that comes in now. So there is a section where it comes in. I didn't see one in our test data, but I've seen it in other clients. So that should come through now. Let us know if you don't see that, along with the 2020 update.
And we have another. Not all of our vendors require a 1099 form. How can I print a report of only 1099 vendors?
Good question. So if you want to see who are 1099 vendors, I'm wondering, and let me look on the vendor listing quickly if there's a way to print that information. And if not, I have another option. So print all vendors, 1099 vendors only. So you could print that as the vendor listing and print your 1099 vendors only. You can print the 1099 payment history on there as well and choose the appropriate year to print that. So if I preview this, we should see just our 1099 vendors, and we should see the payment information on here. This is also going to print a lot of the vendor information, and we can control that. So you'll see here's my first 1099 vendor, and it'll show us all of the information for those 1099s. So I guess that's the way I would do it.
And we have another. Did you notice that the first upper left 1099 on the recipient copy appears to be out of alignment?
Interesting. I did not notice that. I will go back and take a look at that and see if there's any issue with that, but I did not notice that. I can say I have not had any problems with them printing from Atrix. So it might have been a view, the way the view rendered on the screen. But I'll double check that and print them out, and I can let you guys know if I find any issues with that.
Perfect. And we have one more. An employee lost his W-2 and wants another copy. How is that handled?
That's very easy now. So you can actually go through and run that wizard, and you can run it. So what I would do is I would go into Payroll, go to my federal and state tax reporting, and I would run it for a specific employee number. So down here, you can run it for a specific employee number. So I would just pick whomever that was, run through the wizard. Of course, it will go faster because you only have one employee number, and you can reprint that W-2.
And we have another that's come through. On the 1099 vendor only list, it gives the entire list. Is there a way to sort this list, since not all of our vendors require 1099s?
So if they're set up as 1099 vendors, when you print that list, it should print just your 1099 vendors. So let me go back into that because it was kind of quick, so that you can see that you have that option. So you can choose to print your 1099 vendors only. And you can actually just have a number and name listing if you don't want all the detail. You can choose vendor information, name and address listing. You're going to want vendor information if you want to see the 1099 payments on there. So when I preview this, it's not going to show all my vendors. It's just going to show the vendors that are 1099 vendors. So it's set up in vendor maintenance on the additional tab as a 1099 vendor. So you'll see I only have, I have 5. It's actually showing them all. You're right. It should not show them all. That's really interesting. It should only print our 1099 vendors only. So after this call, I'm going to look that up so that I know for myself, and I can get you the information if I find that there's a fix for that. Because that's what it's intended to do. Good catch.
Perfect. Then give me 1 minute as I take back the screen to wrap up the webinar. All right, thank you so much, Monica, for your informative presentation and for taking the time to be here today. For more information on year-end procedures, please register for our final year-end workshop, Year-End Processing and Closing Procedures, on December 15th on our events page. The link will be sent out along with the webinar recording link by tomorrow end of day. Thank you everyone for attending our webinar. Have a wonderful rest of your day.